We're coming on the air tonight with new attacks in western Ukraine, a quite literal warning shot from Russia, and the president delivering a warning shot of his own verbally to China to get on the right side of history. We're going to take you live to Ukraine for that and live to the White House with new details in just the last couple hours about what the president told Xi Jinping. Plus, crazy winds, hail, major thunderstorms affecting millions of people over the next couple days. We've got that severe weather forecast coming up. And explosive testimony from an Army vet turned FBI informant accused of plotting to abduct Michigan's governor. How his tip led to the arrest of 4 other guys and what he said on the stand today. Plus, remember those deadly 737 MAX plane crashes a couple years back? Yeah, the lawyers for the former Boeing pilot who was charged say he's getting scapegoated, what we heard in court today. And the huge news that big credit reporting firms are ready to wipe your medical debt off the books if you've paid up. But it doesn't mean you're totally off the hook. We're going to explain later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we're starting with a split screen of new developments here in Washington and in Ukraine tonight. With here at home, President Biden pushing to isolate Russia even more when it comes to their friend China. And overseas in western Ukraine, only about 40 miles from Poland, a missile attack destroying an aircraft repair facility right near Lviv's airport. Again, this is close to Poland. The latest UN numbers say more than 800 innocent people have been killed so far in Putin's war. And in Lviv, this haunting picture that you're looking at right now, representing the youngest victims, kids, 100 empty strollers, 109 of them in the city center, one for every child who Ukrainian officials say has been killed since Russia invaded. And then in Kyiv, you know, that's the capital, closer to the center of the country, they were hit this morning with Russian forces shelling buildings in residential areas, a school destroyed, same with the playground, a grocery store, homes nearby. Kyiv's mayor telling our own Chuck Todd about the danger his people face.
Nobody have safety in our city. Nobody have safety in our country. It's every citizens of our country is target, especially self-government. The Russians try to kidnap the mayors of another city.
You heard it there. Then you've got further south in the port city of Mariupol, really taking the brunt of it. You know, this is a city we've been talking a lot about over the last couple days, and now officials there say 90% of it is gone, basically, destroyed because of that relentless bombing by Russian troops. You're seeing just some of that video on your screen. We're going to have more on all of this, the president's message to China in just a minute from the White House. But I want to start with Hallie, who is on the ground in Lviv. And Hallie, it seems like that is where some of the escalation was today, although I know the guidance from U.S. military officials has been, listen, Russia isn't necessarily moving closer into western Ukraine. They want to send a message that they still have reach, that even while Ukrainian forces may be fending them off in places like close to Mariupol, although it's getting absolutely sieged, Russia wants the West to know it has the upper hand here.
That's right, and they hit a military facility where aircrafts were being maintained just on the outskirts here of Mariupol. It shows that they're using precision, long-range weapons to hit these places, not that indiscriminate shelling that we've seen in the east where they just take out the whole place. They're targeting places that could be useful to the Ukrainian troops, where they maintain their sort of aging, dwindling fleet of planes. They may be old, they may be dwindling, but the Russians certainly don't want to use them. And you'll remember, Hallie, only last Sunday, they also hit a military base very close to the Polish border. They killed 4 Ukrainian soldiers there. So, yes, they're expanding their attack westward. Not indiscriminate bombing here, very precise bombing, but very worrying for all of these displaced people that have come to Lviv, the last safe place for them.
We've talked about that city of Mariupol that is along the essentially a big port city. If we have a map, we can pull it up here. And I know, Hallie, there have been developments in this theater, and I think people remember it because it was so striking. The word the word kids written in Russian outside that theater, front and back. What is the word on the rescue there? What else do we know about how that city is doing and how they're faring in this war?
Well, Hallie, as you mentioned, that city has been decimated. They describe it as being apocalyptic conditions there, dead bodies on the street. They have nothing there. It's a sort of siege and starvation tactics that the Russians have set upon on that city, and it's a disaster there. You mentioned the theater. So the latest we have on that is that about 130 people have been rescued from that theater. Rescue workers are literally removing rubble and bricks by hand. There's nothing in that city. There's no water, no heating, so there's no real rescue equipment there either. There are around another 1,000 people still trapped in that theater. And Hallie, they've been in there for about 48 hours. So it's hard to imagine what conditions these people are living in, how they feel. They may not even know if they're going to be able to get out. So it's an absolutely desperate situation there. And what the Russians have done is unconscionable in that city.
Some of the desperation, I know, are seeing it. You're talking with people who are trying to get orphans out of other parts of the country, kids without parents. It's gut-wrenching to even think about, to Lviv, to relative safety, right? What are you hearing?
That's right. So we met up with an American group that's helping the Ukrainian government get some kids out of the very badly war-torn east of the country. We met them at a Lviv train station. Those kids, I mean, it was just heartbreaking to see them. They don't have any parents. They've connected very closely to these carers that they have with them. They managed to escape the east, come here to the relative safety of Lviv. Let's take a listen to what some of those American workers had to say.
The Russians have actually come through some of those regions, and several of the caregivers were actually shot and killed from what we're hearing. So some of the children, I mean, they've lost their family. So it's pretty traumatic. This country, the people are just suffering at no fault of their own. It's horrible.
We can't independently verify that those carers were killed, but it goes along with the way the Russians have been attacking this place. Those kids already don't have parents. They were very closely linked to those carers. I mean, the trauma is just unimaginable for these guys. But I've got to tell you, Hallie, all of the kids were smiling. They were talking to us. You could kind of see the relief of escaping that carnage in the east to the relative safety of the west.
Kids are so resilient, but no kids should have to go through that. Hallie Arusi, live there for us in Lviv. Hallie, thank you so much. There is hope, of course, that these 9 humanitarian corridors that have been agreed to, according to Ukraine's deputy prime minister, will help. That's happening as we're getting new details in just the last couple hours about this really important call, right? Cast as this high-stakes call between President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. With the White House saying President Biden talked about the consequences if China provides what they call material support to Russia. What does that mean, right? That's maybe economic help. That's maybe military help. The White House press secretary says President Biden stopped short of making any specific requests. Listen.
China has to make a decision for themselves about where they want to stand and how they want the history books to look at them and view their actions.
China so far is nearly alone on the world stage in avoiding directly condemning Vladimir Putin. Remember, it wasn't too long ago, a month, a little bit, around then, that Xi and Putin met right before the invasion in Beijing at the start of the Winter Olympics. They released this 5,000-word statement at the time, declaring their two countries' limitless friendship. Heidi Presbola joins us now with more on this. And Heidi, that limitless friendship is exactly why President Biden wants to be talking to China, to say, hey, we've got to stake in this too. Cool it down. What's interesting here, Heidi, is the way that the White House is describing the call and the way that the Chinese are framing this discussion.
Yeah, so finally we got that readout after several hours from the White House perspective of this. And what we were told by a senior administration official, Hallie, was that the president went into great detail about how he believes we got here, his assessment of Putin's actions and what we're doing to try and help the Ukrainians. But here are the main highlights, according to that briefing that we got just about an hour or so ago, that the president stressed that there will be consequences, implications and consequences if China provides, quote, material support to Russia. He stressed his concerns, President Biden did, also that Russia is spreading disinformation about biological weapons in Ukraine. He underscored his support for a diplomatic resolution, actually both of them did, and then they agreed to keep the lines of communication open. Hallie, these were really the main takeaways from that call.
So then what's the next piece of this, Heidi?
The next piece is that the president did not, and you teased this in your introduction, but the president actually didn't make any specific requests of China. This was something that we were potentially expecting going into this, that the president would be very specific about what he wants the Chinese to do. But we were told both by the senior administration official and by the White House press secretary that this is now wholly China's decision, that the president did this to lay out the case with great specificity and then turn to China in the coming days and weeks and basically make an assessment of whether China is going to be a good faith actor here or whether they're going to squander their position on the world stage at this moment as basically, Hallie, the only major superpower at this point who has yet to condemn Vladimir Putin's actions. The press secretary also specified that the punishment could come in the form of, she used the S word, sanctions. And she wasn't real specific when it came to, are you talking about weapons support? Are you talking about economic support? She said everything. We're talking about everything. And so it's really a broad lens that they're putting on China at this moment. And they say the next days and weeks, Hallie, will really determine whether this administration believes that China is acting in good faith here or whether they're trying to help Vladimir Putin, which would come with devastating consequences, they say as well, for the Chinese, primarily in the form of economic penalties. Hallie?
Heidi Presbilla, outside the White House for us tonight. Heidi, thank you. More than 400 companies have closed up shop in Russia. But some who have said they're stopping business are finding that a little easier said than done. You've got big companies, Subway, Burger King, for example, who have tried to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, but they find themselves coming up against franchise owners who, according to franchise rules, don't actually have to close their doors. Papa John's has also taken a lot of heat on social media after one U.S. franchise operator in Russia refused to close 190 stores there, even after Papa John said it would suspend corporate operations in Russia. The operator told the New York Times he's doing it out of compassion for Russians who don't have anything to do with the politicians in power. We'll have more on the war in Ukraine later on in the show. But in other headlines here at home, you have Moderna, big news, now looking for approval from the FDA for a fourth booster shot. Wait, fourth COVID shot, second booster. Think about that for a second. And they want it for all adults. This is a lot broader than what Pfizer has already asked for, which is for older people, people 65 and older. And it's coming as you know, probably happening in your city or town. COVID restrictions are getting more relaxed. You've got health officials still now warning that the spike in cases in Europe and China might end up here, with the White House today again reiterating the need for more COVID money from Congress, saying, hey, if we don't get this, we may not have enough money to fight another surge. That's kind of what we heard from HHS Secretary Javier Becerra today, warning of devastating consequences if Congress doesn't get it together and pass another emergency funding package. That will go toward things like booster shots, treatments, testing, new research. He's saying the White House is willing to compromise and work with Congress to get this done. I want to bring in now Erica Edwards, who covers all things medical for us here on NBC News now. Erica, it's good to have you with us. What's interesting about this new request from Moderna for a fourth shot, a second booster, it's a lot broader of a request than Pfizer. Pfizer said, hey, just older folks. Moderna saying everybody. Why? Well, explain that for us and what the data says.
Hey, Hallie, good afternoon. So in a press release, Moderna said that it made the request to, quote, provide flexibility to the CDC and doctors so that they can make the determination of who should really get this fourth shot, this second booster shot. The data to support this are pretty unclear. It's kind of a bit of a head scratcher, to be honest with you. Both Pfizer and Moderna both cited Israeli data that found that fourth dose might not have any impact at all when it comes to younger, healthier adults, but it would potentially have an impact on those over age 60. Of course, we know, Hallie, that people over age 60, 65, 70, and 80, those are the ones most at risk for COVID-19 vaccinations. And that's why I think a lot of experts are saying, this is really where that fourth dose would be best allocated.
So as you've been talking with doctors and experts, Erica, what are they telling you about, whether most of us, let's say, healthy adults who might want a fourth shot, what should they do?
Well, at this point, there's no fourth shot available. If anyone is, in fact, concerned about their personal risk, they need to continue on those tried and true mitigation measures. That's avoiding large crowds and continuing masking, even in areas where those mask mandates have been lifted. Hallie?
You also heard from the HHS secretary today that, yeah, we're turning a corner on COVID, but he says this is not the time to go dark in terms of the money piece of it. There's been this warning from the White House, framed politically about how Congress has got to get this done. They've got to get an emergency package passed, or else we might have some serious problems down the road. What do those problems realistically look like?
Well, that fourth shot would just simply go out the window. I mean, earlier this week...
For free, right, Erica? It doesn't mean it wouldn't be created, but it means we wouldn't necessarily be able to get it for free.
That's exactly right, Hallie. So earlier this week, White House officials said that if they did not get that funding, that they would not be able to provide that fourth shot for free, as you said. I mean, what's more, there's a lot of money that goes into the research behind things like new variants that pop up. There's a lot of money that goes into researching what happens when things like Delta and Omicron come along. And right now, public health officials, the White House, et cetera, they say that they really want to be ready for just in case that next variant does pop up and creates havoc like those other variants have.
Erica Edwards, great to have your expertise in reporting here on the show. Thank you. We are in for some potentially dangerous weather days ahead, now through early next week. Millions of us are under risk for severe thunderstorms, possibly tornadoes, for hail and for wind. In places like Alabama, it's already starting. Look at this. Multiple people were hurt after major thunderstorms hit a bunch of mobile homes. Very, very extreme winds. At least 5 people are now in the hospital. In Florida, you've got a tornado watch in full effect. Look at this. Trees down, power lines down. And then in Texas, more extreme weather in the form of wildfires. And look at the aftermath here. Hundreds of homes were evacuated. Officials are actually still working to get a handle on that fire. Michelle Grossman joins us now. So, Michelle, tornado watch in effect in a lot of different parts of the country. Talk about expectations as we head into the weekend.
Hi there, Hallie. Well, we're looking at a serious situation. We're looking at a multi-day event. So not just tonight, not just tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So we're talking about a stretch of severe weather. Let's show you what's happening right now because we've been watching storms all day long in the southeast. You can see this on radar, still really active. It's a huge storm stretching from the southeast all the way to the upper Midwest. You have the severe weather in the south, and then on the backside, you have some snow. So that classic setup where that cold air meets the really warm air. So as we go throughout time here tonight, we're most concerned with the severe weather. We do have a tornado watch until 7 p.m. You can see that pink line on the map here. That's your tornado watch box. Also watching really heavy rain. That's where you see the darker colors, the yellows, oranges. And what really stands out to me right now is all that lightning that is moving through the Gulf Coast states. So that's what we're looking at right now. We're going to continue to track that for you. But this is the setup. So you have that warm, moist Gulf air that's streaming into this storm. It's literally the fuel for the fire here. And then on the backside, we have that cold air in addition to some strong upper level winds. That adds the lift, that adds the spin, and that's what we're seeing right now, and that's what we're going to see throughout the weekend into early next week. So as we go throughout time here this evening, tracking those severe storms, then as we near tomorrow, we're going to see that cold front move off to the east. So now the storm threat is along the Carolina coast into the interior northeast. And notice you even have some winter weather in the northeast as well. The state of Maine could see a mix of snow and rain. So once again, it's going to be a really active weekend, at least to begin with. Sunday's going to be a little bit quieter. Remember, that's the first day of spring, so a little quieter for some. Not tonight, though. 11 million at risk. You can see that yellow circle. That is your slight risk for severe storms stretching from the Gulf Coast states all the way up to the Midwest into Evansville, Illinois. And then as we look into tomorrow, 12 million at risk. This has shifted off to the east, now including the Carolinas into the interior parts of Northeast. So again, a really active day tomorrow. And look at this map. This, I mean, kind of blows my mind. Tonight, tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the Severe Prediction Center has put out a risk, an enhanced risk. That's pretty high Monday and Tuesday this far out. So we're going to really continue to watch this. This doesn't happen that often, and we've been watching it for 8 days straight. Then the rainfall forecast, Hallie, we are looking at anywhere from 1 to 2 inches, but pockets of more where we're seeing flooding rains. We're seeing those spin ups and those training rains in the southeast, and we could see that into the interior northeast as well. Hallie?
Michelle Grossman, it's great to have the forecast. I know you'll be keeping a close eye on that, as you say, through early next week. Appreciate it. Now to explosive testimony from an FBI informant known as Big Dan, taking the stand in the trial against 4 men accused of plotting to kidnap the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, because they were apparently upset about her COVID restrictions. It was the tip from Big Dan that eventually led to the arrest of the 4 guys you see on the screen right here back in October of 2020, along with 2 other men who have already pleaded guilty to the conspiracy. Well, today, the jury got to hear Big Dan's secret recordings of the suspects talking about Governor Whitmer. Here's the deal. Prosecutors say the 6 men were upset over COVID restrictions right at the height of the pandemic and started plotting to kidnap the governor from her summer home and blow up the bridge leading to it so police would have a tough time getting there. What they didn't know is that they were being closely watched by FBI agents and at least 5 informants who watched the men, they say, set off explosives, survey the governor's summer house, practice shooting their weapons, too. Their defense lawyers claim the informants and the undercover agents influenced the men into the plot. That's where this trial hinges on. Megan Fitzgerald is joining us now. So, Megan, let me start with Big Dan, right? This informant who's getting some attention here and this really critical testimony. What stood out to you about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, Hallie, to give you an idea of who Big Dan is, he's a former veteran, an Iraq veteran, who said that he was looking on Facebook for a group because he wanted to try and maintain his firearm skills. He found this organization, joined it, and he says it wasn't until they started talking about killing police officers that he blew the whistle, and then that's when he was contacted by FBI to see if he would be an informant. So fast forward to today, and he's bringing these jurors inside that first reconnaissance mission where they're driving around. He's inside the car with some of these ringleaders, especially Adam Fox. They're reconning the area. They're trying to find the location of Governor Whitmer's second home. When they find it, he tells jurors about the excitement that was inside the car from Adam Fox. And then he goes on to talk about, the plan that they had to try and kidnap her, how they would tie her up with hog ties and then drag her out to the boat outside and then drive off. But keep in mind that Big Dan had an audio recording on him. So he's recording this entire thing. And that's what jurors heard today inside the courtroom. So I want to read for you one of the quotes that these jurors heard from the ringleader, Adam Fox. He said, quote, "Ain't funny when you ain't got all the power." Now, of course, this is presumably what he would have said if they executed this mission and successfully were able to kidnap Governor Whitmer. And then also we heard from another ringleader on that audio recording. This is Barry Croft, who says, quote, "Treason is a hanging offense." So not only did these jurors have an opportunity to hear from this informant who was inside this operation, but again, they had to listen themselves to what was said inside.
We talked about how the defense has basically tried to make this case that, hey, it was these informants, it was these people, working for the FBI undercover who helped to influence this plot. They're basically trying to say this wouldn't have happened if it weren't for them. But 2 people who have already pleaded guilty in this whole thing said nobody was entrapped by agents or informants. How damaging might that be to the defense here?
Yeah, Hallie, this is huge. As you said, the defense's argument here is that these 5 informants, these 2 FBI officers, egged on these other defendants to try and kidnap the governor of Michigan. And then you've got these 2 other guys who are also suspects here, but pled guilty, who are expected to testify for the prosecution, who are saying, no, actually, that's not what happened. We planned on doing this from the very beginning, Hallie.
We haven't heard too much from Governor Whitmer since the trial started about this, right?
Yeah, curious minds want to know. I mean, we're getting this level of detail inside the courtroom. What is she thinking? What is she saying? We haven't heard from her lately. And in fact, hear from her. She blamed President Trump, saying that he did not condemn these far-right extremists and that he egged on and really just fanned the flames of people who were against these COVID restrictions. So it certainly will be interesting to see if she has something to say when this trial wraps, which is expected to be sometime next month, Hallie.
Megan Fitzgerald, thank you for staying on top of that for us. Appreciate it. Coming up here on this show, the House passes a bill to stop a very specific kind of discrimination. Why lawmakers say we need the Crown Act to protect people with natural hairstyles. And American Airlines is going to start letting you buy booze on its flights again after 2 years of abstaining. We'll tell you when in the 5 things. A victory today for people who wear their hair in cornrows, twists, braids, because the House today passed what's called the Crown Act, which would ban discriminating against somebody because of their hair. And you heard lawmakers today on the floor making these really passionate arguments for why this needs to happen and why it needs to happen now. Watch.
There is no logical reason that anyone should be discriminated against on any level because of the texture of their hair or the style of their hair.
I have had people tell my employer that I was an embarrassment sitting in the front office because of the way my hair looked.
This is a kitchen table issue in black households.
The CROWN Act, C-R-O-W-N, stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And it means that you can't be discriminated against based on the texture or style of your hair. It passed along party lines today. It's not a done deal yet. It still has to go through the Senate, would still have to get signed into law by the president. Hallie Raffa is joining us now from Capitol Hill. And Hallie, one of the lawmakers who supports this referenced a high school wrestler by the name of Andrew Johnson. People might remember back in 2018, he was forced to cut his dreadlocks or else forfeit a match back then. And it feels like we heard a lot of stories like this today as these lawmakers were making the case.
Absolutely, Hallie. We heard a lot of personal stories on the House floor today, but supporters of this bill say that for decades, African Americans have been discriminated against because of the texture, the style of their hair. They say so many have been forced to conform to what they call white beauty standards by sometimes wearing wigs or chemically treating and damaging their hair. And this really struck a chord with some lawmakers on the House floor today who recalled personal experiences. You had Congresswoman Cori Bush, who said, as a woman with braids, she knows what it feels like to be isolated because of simply a hairstyle. You also had Congresswoman Gwen Moore, who, as you played earlier at the top, say that a former employer called her a, quote, embarrassment because of her hairstyle. And another Congresswoman, Bonnie Watson Coleman, who actually introduced this bill, said it's simple. Discrimination against blacks based on a hairstyle or a texture is discrimination against blacks in general, and that's why she's pushing so hard for support of this bill, Hallie.
So we mentioned it's still got to go to the Senate. It passed along party lines today, as we said, meaning most Democrats, I think all Democrats voted for it, and a few Republicans came on board too.
That's right. So all House Democrats and a handful, I think about 14 Republicans voted in favor of this. But there were almost 200 Republicans who voted against it. And one of them was Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio, who said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 covers this type of discrimination. Listen here.
We have rights. The civil rights law cover this thing, to cover this kind of any kind of discrimination. It's covered. It's wrong if it happens. But this is what the Democrats are focused on. 14 months of chaos, and we're doing a bill on hair.
But Hallie, the text of this bill actually explicitly states that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 doesn't cover this. It talks about it a little bit, but it doesn't go so far as to cover these different hairstyles and textures. So people are saying that, supporters of this bill are saying that it's definitely necessary to have these additions. After all, it's been almost 60 years since that passed. So there are definitely edits and additions that need to be made. And as you mentioned, this passed the House. Now it needs to go to the Senate. We don't have an update yet on when we can expect a vote in the Senate, but definitely something we're keeping our eye on here.
Hallie Raffa, thank you so much. Appreciate you being on. Good to see you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, big tech executives could face time behind bars if they do not follow a specific online safety bill over in the UK. The heads of companies like Meta, Google, Facebook, facing pressure to stop the spread of harmful content to try to protect kids on their platforms. The bill will be debated in Parliament before it becomes a law. Number 2, Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans is reportedly waiving his no-trade clause to go to the Cleveland Browns. The QB would apparently get a new 5-year contract worth $230 million. It is huge news in the NFL, especially because Watson hasn't been on the field since the 2022 season over accusations of sexual misconduct. Number 3, American Airlines bringing booze back on its planes. Starting April 18th, you're going to be able to buy alcohol again on flights. The airline and a bunch of others stopped selling drinks early on in the pandemic. They are the last big U.S. carrier to make this announcement. Number 4, it looks like Pete Davidson isn't headed to space anymore. We told you earlier this week the SNL star was going on a Blue Origin space flight. That flight has been rescheduled to March 29th. Davidson apparently can't make it. He's got other big plans. Blue Origin says it's going to announce who gets that empty seat soon. Number 5. I'm going to try to stump you here. Guess what the happiest country in the world is? Wait, we spoiled it with the graphic on screen. It's Finland. I was going to give you a minute to guess, but there it is. It is named the world's happiest country for the 5th year in a row. That's from the World Happiness Report. It ranks countries by what it calls quality of life. The U.S. came in 16th. 16th for the U.S. I guess that's not so bad. Still to come. A big move that could help a ton of people. Most medical debts set to be dropped from credit reports. Why now? And what this means for you and your credit score. Plus, it seems like the housing market is always hot these days, but prices on homes might cool you down. If you're looking, what you should know before jumping into the buying pool. Next. Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is getting ready for her confirmation hearings starting Monday. So, what do Republicans have in store for her? We're going to talk about that in just a minute with a preview. But first, starting this summer, big news, right? The biggest credit reporting firms aren't going to count debt from medical bills against you. Doesn't mean they're erasing the debt itself, right? But they are saying, let's say you paid your medical bills late. They went to a collection agency that ended up on your credit report. 70% of that debt is no longer going to show up. And you know, sometimes this stuff can stick around on your report for years, 7 years, even after you paid it. And on top of that, these companies are also saying that now you get a little bit longer before any kind of medical debt ends up on your credit report in the first place if it's not paid, from 6 months to a year. That means you have a little more time to work with your insurance to get that bill paid. Tom Costello is joining me now. I can't emphasize enough what a big deal this is because, listen, I think a lot of people have personal stories about issues with debt and credit reports. Your credit report matters so much for like anything you want to do. And if something's sticking on there, you know, you have 600 of medical debt or whatever it is, that's years of your life.
So listen to this stat. 20% of American households have medical debt. So that's 1 out of every 5th person in your apartment building, on your street, whatever. 20% have medical debt. 43 million people have credit reports that are affected by medical debt. So what are we talking about? You know, you go to the hospital, and as you know, these bills rack up pretty quickly. And maybe you're late in paying that off. So even if you do pay it off, it sticks on your credit report. That means it's harder to get a good loan for that apartment rental, for example, a new mortgage, a new car, even getting a job reference, right? So because of all of that now, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, the big three, they're going to wipe that out as of July 1st, assuming you did pay. If you didn't pay, no, sorry, it's going to stay on your bill, on your credit report.
But that's been the dagger, I think, for a lot of people, right? Is you get this thing from the collection, you pay, and then it sits on your credit report for years. They're saying that's the piece that's going to go away. And that's not fair,
right? Because
it doesn't feel fair, but
a lot of studies have shown that, in fact, people who have trouble paying off their medical bills, they're not necessarily a bad credit risk for a new home, for a new car. So is it fair to hang that on them for so many years? And the answer is no. By the way, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been very adamant about this, saying that it's not fair, and in fact, they need to do something about it. Today they did.
Okay, why now?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, as I mentioned, the Bureau's been on their case and trying to, beat the drum. In addition, they had a lot of problems during COVID. How many Americans do you know, insured and uninsured, racked up medical bills because of COVID? Those bills are racking up and getting higher and higher, and the overall feeling was they needed to do something now.
You also have to I don't know, Tom, I'm not trying to editorialize here, but there's some optics involved here, too, for these big credit reporting companies, no?
Well, sure. I mean, like I said, they've been under a lot of pressure. They've been I assume that given the pressure coming from the Bureau, it's possible Congress might have gotten involved had these agencies not taken this initiative on their own.
July 1st, right?
July 1st. And then, if you incur new medical debt, it won't go on your credit report until a year after that's been referred to the credit rating agencies, the collection agencies. And if you have debt under $500, it's not going to go on there at all.
This is big news.
It is big news. It's a lot of families are affected.
Yes, Tom Costello, I'm so glad you brought it to us. We'll look for more of your reporting on Nightly News.
NBC Nightly News. Be there, be square.
Good to see you. Thank you, Tom.
All right.
So the housing market, it has been hot for the past couple years. But now you've got buyers running into price problems. Just today, you had the National Association of Realtors saying about 6 million homes that exist, right? 6 million homes were sold this past month. That's down a couple of percent from February of last year. The demand for housing is so high because people have shifted their lifestyle in the pandemic. Mortgage rates, at least right now, are super low. But supply and demand, prices are spiking because the supply is so short. And to really highlight this whole price thing, check out this stat. Zillow says 146 cities across the U.S. gained $1 million status in 2021, meaning the typical home in those cities costs at least $1 million. 480 wide cities across the country have that status. Joining me now is Joel Linkat. Explain the biggest contributor here. Is this the pandemic lifestyle spike? Is this the fact that like the supply chain issues are out of control and it's tougher to get new houses built? What's the problem?
All of the above and then some, Hallie. Okay. I mean, this is a classic supply and demand problem. And you remember in the pandemic, so many people that we knew moved out of cities into the suburbs and beyond, right? So add that on top of the people who were already planning to upgrade their homes, and you really have this perfect storm for really high prices and very little housing inventory out there. And there's just not enough houses to go around. So you mentioned those Zillow typical home values. It's just eye-popping to me. And that means basically that half the homes in that city are above that price, that value of $1 million, and the other half are below. So in about 500 cities in the U.S., the typical value of a home is over $1 million, and it's really changed dramatically in some places. We've been looking at Sun Valley, Idaho. You know, usually this is a sleepy resort town, and residents there are telling us that, you know, until the last 3 years when the pandemic really started sending transplants there, you know, things have really changed. The people who run the town, its amenities, the restaurant workers, the grocery stores, the hospitals, people are being priced out, and home values have increased 43% over the last 2 years alone. And that's the case in so many places. There's some towns on the Jersey Shore, for example, on the East Coast, that have seen over 50% in increases of typical home value over the past 2 years. And local residents can't always afford to pay that top dollar when they're trying to make a move. And there's so many other people coming in from more expensive places and just plunking down the cash.
But so this is the question, right? Because like I'm 37 and I have friends that are looking to buy houses, you know, a lot of first-time home buyers. Mm-hmm. What if you are a first-time or second-time home buyer and you're trying to compete with these people who are coming in with like all cash offers on these crazy expensive? I live in D.C., which is a hot market, and I hear about this all the time. It's like the Hunger Games, you know, trying to get a successful bid on a house here. You got the Fed changing mortgage rates, right? It feels like this is all kind of a confluence of issues.
Yeah, from you to Washington and D.C. to me here in Los Angeles.
Tell me about
every place in between. And basically, this is the supply and demand problem here. And it's really a double whammy because you have to have so much cash to compete. And it's not just being able to, you know, hit that down payment and maybe bid asking or even, you know, say 5 or 10 grand above asking. You really have to be able to compete with all kinds of different factors when you're talking about all cash offers. So it really hurts people, especially the first and second time home buyers who, you know, you need a mortgage to buy the house. You are not rolling in cash. And so to be able to compete like that, plus the rising interest rates that we see, it's very difficult, and a lot of people are actually looking for less home because they're anticipating that they're going to be locking in a rate that's going to go up, and that obviously impacts your monthly payment, your annual totals, and then you're probably looking for a little bit less of a home to buy. But the good news here is that we are seeing some new construction, and that went up, I guess, so that's good news, you know, but those houses don't turn around really quickly, right? It takes a while for new construction to happen, but it's a really tough market out there. Refinancing is no longer necessarily, you know, a good way out of this. So basically, with new housing starts, you're going to have more housing eventually, but it doesn't happen overnight, Hallie.
It's going to take a minute. Joel Linkat live for us there in hot LA as well. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thanks.
You got the White House. Speaking of here in Washington today, the White House calling Republican attempts to attack Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's record desperate and dishonest. Just a few days before her confirmation hearings start on Capitol Hill. That's in response to senators like Missouri's Josh Hallie, who's planning to target her cases related to child sex offenders. The White House says her rulings are being taken out of context. Another possible issue that may be front and center, the Trump factor. Just last year, Judge Jackson joined the decision to let the House January 6th committee get documents from the Trump White House. And she ruled in 2019 that the former White House lawyer, Don McGahn, could be compelled to testify in front of the House. Today, the American Bar Association said that Judge Jackson is well qualified to serve on the court. That's like an official rating from the ABA, well qualified. It's the highest possible rating she could get. Joining me now is Leanne Caldwell. So, Leanne, the next time that we have this show, right, the next time that you will see me on NBC News Now, we will be talking about Judge Jackson's likely opening statement and the start of these confirmation hearings. They are Monday. They are soon. They are hugely important. We'll have a lot of coverage of it. Give us a bit of a preview, if you will, because this is a significant moment for her.
It is absolutely significant. Her nomination is also historic as well. We can't forget that she is the first black woman nominated to the Supreme Court. She's also, Hallie, has a background in public defense, which is very rare on the Supreme Court. And that you can expect to be something that Republicans are really going to hone in on as well, especially since most senators, most Republicans anyway, are prosecutors. And so you can talk about, they're likely going to talk about some of the people that she defended, including Guantanamo Bay detainees, and also some of the sentencing guidelines that she sent down when she was a judge. So this is going to be a big moment for her, and it'll be interesting to see how she deals with this very tough, in the public questioning from some adversaries on the other side of the aisle, Hallie.
Adversaries like, I think, from what we've seen, we mentioned Senator Josh Hawley. Some of this, Leanne, and listen, there is a degree, and I think it's fair to say, of let's say, lawmakers being aware that what they're saying is being televised live on camera, right? Especially if you're a lawmaker who is looking to position yourself as perhaps a presidential contender come 2024.
Absolutely. People like Senator Josh Hawley, maybe Ted Cruz, you can add to that, perhaps even Senator Tom Cotton as well. People who have presidential ambitions, they have a megaphone here, and they are likely to use it in the Supreme Court nominations. These are things that are very important for the Republican base. They watch out for this, the judicial experience especially. And as far as Senator Hawley is concerned, one of the things that we know he is going to focus on is her sentencing guidelines on child pornography cases. He's going to cite 7 cases throughout his questioning where he says that she gave a less sentence than what the standard sentencing requirements are. So we can be sure that he is going to focus on that. The White House has already hit back on that argument, saying that that any sort of attacks on her sentencing, especially on this issue, are not based in fact. But this is all going to play out next week, Hallie.
Real quickly, and before I let you go, we mentioned some of those Trump executive privilege decisions that she was a part of. How much do you see that being a part of some of the discussion around this on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday?
Well, she wrote the line that's the infamous line, or famous line now, that presidents are not kings. And that is something that has really taken a hold. People really noticed that line when that decision came out a couple of years ago in the McGahn case. But we and our team have been talking to senators on the Judiciary Committee, asking them what they are going to focus on. This actually hasn't been a top priority, even for Republicans. I expect it to come up. I don't know which senator is going to do it, but they've been talking about other things, mostly on saying that she is going to be soft on crime and she is a ploy of the far left groups. But it'll come up. I'm just really going to be watching who brings it up, though, Hallie.
Yeah, and you know the Democrats are going to be giving her as much backing as possible, given the historic nature of her nomination and what it would mean for the Democratic agenda. Leanne Caldwell, live on the Hill, as I alluded to, full coverage. You can watch it however you're watching this show right now, Monday, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on NBC News Now. It's going to be a huge week. Definitely stick with us right here. Still ahead, also right here, Citigroup, helping employees cross state lines in response to Texas's restrictive abortion law. We're going to explain in the local. And breaking news just into us, Google hit with the lawsuit, being accused of systemic bias against its black employees. We've got more details on that right after the break. Do you have a bracket this year? Is it busted? Because there have been some huge March Madness shakeups. There's also some big NCAA cash-ins, too. We're going to explain that in just a bit. But first, NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, Citigroup will cover the costs of travel for employees who have to go out of state for an abortion. The company is announcing this as a response to Texas's restrictive law on the procedure. Citigroup is the first big U.S. bank to put in place this kind of policy, and Republicans in the state are already speaking out against it. From our Midwest Bureau, a flight instructor and student pilot are doing okay after crash landing a plane in an Ohio lake. Yes, that is the plane. You are looking at it in a lake. Shouldn't be there, right? It happened in Warren County. They were flying over when the engine suddenly failed. The flight instructor said he drove the plane toward a shallow part of the water when he realized they were going to crash. The FAA is planning to look into why the engine failed in the first place. And from our Northeast Bureau, Philly high schools are moving their start times a little later in the morning to 9 a.m. The school district says they want kids to be well-rested and ready to learn. It would also give them more time to commute in if they live out of the way. The time change will go into effect for the next school year, but I want to know where it was 20 years ago when I was in high school. 7:15 morning bell. No, thank you. Today, lawyers for former Boeing pilot Mark Faulkner are arguing he's being scapegoated for those deadly Boeing 737 MAX crashes a few years ago. Remember those? His trial started today in Texas. Faulkner was the 737 MAX's chief technical pilot, and he's the only person charged by the Justice Department in those crashes. It's pretty high stakes here. He's facing 4 counts of wire fraud that each carry a maximum penalty of 20 years behind bars. Remember those crashes, 2018 and 2019, just 5 months apart? 346 people died, and 737 MAX planes were grounded, basically, for 2 years. Investigators blamed the plane's flight control system. Faulkner is accused of misleading the FAA about that system by cutting back how much training pilots would need to fly it, making it more attractive to airlines. Some breaking news just into us now. A new lawsuit we just got word of right as we were coming on the air, accusing Google of systemic bias against black employees. The complaint, that's looking for class action status, says Google steers black workers to lower-level jobs, pays them less, doesn't give them opportunities to advance because of their race, the suit says. And it claims Google maintains a racially biased corporate culture that favors white men. Jennifer Elias joins us now with more details. Jennifer, I'm glad to have you with us. I know this news is just coming across, but can you tell us a little bit more about this case, who's bringing it, et cetera?
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump is leading this new lawsuit against Google, claiming that the company has practiced systematic discrimination against black employees. And the thing to know about this lawsuit so far of what we know, and you're right, it just came across in the last hour, so I just read it. Ben Crump is very prominent. He's defended everyone from Trayvon Martin to George Floyd, and he is now taking on this lawsuit. He says he'll have a press conference next week about it with some of the employees who are going to bring their personal grievances and allegations against the company. Another thing to note is this lawsuit is very wide-ranging. It's seeking class action. It's alleging everything from lower pay for black employees versus employees of other races. It's alleging that they are put in lower positions than they're actually qualified for. And it's also alleging things like, checking black employees' badge on Google campuses, allegedly more than other employees.
And I know this news just broke, and I'm going to ask that annoying anchor question that drives reporters crazy, but is there any response from Google yet, or is it too soon?
So far, no response. I mean, okay. I reached out to them as soon as the lawsuit dropped and haven't heard back from them so far. But I imagine they'll probably say that they will fight it aggressively, I would assume.
California is already investigating the way that Google treats black women there. Is this at all linked, this new lawsuit, in any way that we know?
It's too early to tell. I don't know for sure. So that lawsuit, that investigation went into effect last winter. It's very possible there's some overlap, especially with some of the folks who reportedly have been interviewing for that.
Jennifer Elias, thank you so much for scrambling on this developing news. We appreciate it. We're glad to see you. Today, get ready to check this happy moment out. Big celebrations on the campus of St. Peter's University in New Jersey. Why? Yeah, they're going crazy because their men's basketball team, nicknamed the Peacocks, by the way, pulled off a huge upset against the #2 seed Kentucky in the NCAA men's tournament. Never bet against the Peacock, baby. That's the moral of that story. You can see the students going bananas. I mean, obviously, a #15 seed beating a #2 seed. Hello. The women tip off today. And even though we're only in the first round of games, the women's tournament specifically is already making some history. It's the first one since the rules got changed so that athletes can actually make money on their name, image, and likeness. This is that NIL stuff you've probably heard about. It means they can have social media ads, they can have branded merch, and a lot of these women athletes are really cashing in. Priscilla Thompson is joining us now. And Priscilla, I love this. I like this statistic. Women athletes on some platforms are actually making more than the men right now. Talk us through that.
Yeah, Hallie, as you said, the ladies are cashing in. Heading into March Madness, women basketball players are making about 3.5% more in total compensation than their male counterparts. And 3.5% may not sound like a lot, but let me give you some hard sort of numbers here. When we look at social media, across all social media, men do edge out the women slightly, but on TikTok, the platform where athletes get paid the most, women make nearly $700 more per post than their male counterparts. And, you know, we're talking about March Madness, so let's bring in those brackets and those players who are actually going to be in the games. When we look at the top 25 players who are considered most marketable, to have the most brand power, the most followers, 15 of the top 25 are women. One of those women I actually had an opportunity to speak with. She told me that she made $300,000 in just 6 months with these new rules in place, Hallie.
What are the women doing with this opportunity, right? Some of them I know are really trying to push for some change here as we shine a spotlight on what the women athletes are doing, which is so impressive, too.
Absolutely. The women athletes I spoke to say they feel like this is empowering. They feel like their voices are being heard. And I talked with Sedona Prince with the Oregon Ducks, and she was that person you may remember. She posted a viral video at the NCAA tournament last year showing the huge disparities between the men's facilities and the women's facilities, from the weight room to the food, even the swag bags. And I talked to her and I asked her, you know, what does the tournament look like this year? Have those new NIL rules had an impact? Have they changed anything? And take a listen to what she told me.
I think before last year, a lot of women's athletes and athletes in general, all NCAA athletes, didn't recognize the voice they had. And if they felt something, that they could share it. It was kind of this fear. And I felt that too, of just this massive organization, controlling us. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of players are having that confidence now to speak up against what they feel is wrong.
And I spoke to Deja Kelly, who plays for UNC on the women's team there, and she tells me that it is empowering, and she feels like she can share a bit more of herself and her passions through these sort of brand ambassadorships and things like that, while also making some extra money.
That is not a bad way to do it. Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much. We're excited to see more of your reporting coming up in just a little bit on Top Story with Tom Yamas. Thank you. That does it for us here on this show this hour. We're going to have a whole lot more for you Monday. Big day here in Washington. Same time, same place. Have a great weekend. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.